Let's go Dolphins! The conversation around the Miami Dolphins has suddenly taken an interesting turn, and this time the spotlight is on a potential move that has already sparked debate among fans. There's growing discussion about whether Miami should consider signing veteran cornerback Trayvon Diggs if the opportunity becomes available in free agency. Some believe his experience alone makes him worth considering, while others see far more risk than reward. That is exactly what makes this situation so intriguing. The atmosphere surrounding the Dolphins continues to generate strong opinions, especially as every possible roster addition is analyzed from every angle. Now I want to know something from you before we continue. What do you think is the smarter approach for Miami? Should the team take a chance on a veteran trying to revive his career, or continue investing in the younger players already on the roster? What I'm about to tell you might completely change the way you look at this situation. But before we go any further, make sure you've already hit the like button if you're truly a Miami Dolphins fan. And if you can, leave this comment below. Go Dolphins! Fins up! Now let's get straight to the story. The latest discussion centers around a report identifying the Miami Dolphins as one of the possible landing spots for former two-time Pro Bowl cornerback Trayvon Diggs. Another team mentioned alongside Miami is Detroit, but naturally Dolphins fans immediately began asking whether this is a move that would actually improve the roster or simply create more questions than answers. The reasoning behind connecting Diggs to Miami appears to be based on familiarity. There are people within the Dolphins organization who were connected to bringing him in previously, making it easy to speculate that another opportunity could emerge. While that connection exists, it does not necessarily mean a signing is likely. On paper, Diggs certainly carries an impressive resume. He led the NFL in interceptions during the 2021 season and became one of the league's most recognizable defensive backs. His reputation was built on creating turnovers and making game-changing plays. At just 27 years old, turning 28 before the season begins, he is not considered an aging veteran by NFL standards. However, recent seasons have painted a much different picture. Between 2023 and 2025, Diggs appeared in only 22 games after dealing with multiple injuries, including a torn ACL that reportedly involved additional complications during his recovery. Following his release by Dallas, Green Bay added him to its roster, but his impact remained extremely limited. He appeared in only one regular season game and logged just a single defensive snap during the playoffs. The biggest concern isn't simply availability. It is production. There is hope among some observers that a healthy 2026 season could allow Diggs to rediscover the form that once made him one of football's premier ball hawks. But based on his most recent performances, there are legitimate reasons to question whether that version of the player can still return. Instead of forcing turnovers, Diggs finished last season without recording an interception. Coverage statistics also became a major concern. Opposing quarterbacks enjoyed enormous success when throwing in his direction, completing passes at an extremely high rate while producing an almost perfect quarterback rating when targeting him. Those numbers naturally create hesitation for any team considering giving him meaningful playing time. Because of that, some believe that if Diggs were signed anywhere, his best role would be in specialized defensive packages rather than as an every-down starter. Situational appearances on obvious passing downs could allow him to contribute without placing too much responsibility on him. But does that role actually fit what Miami currently needs? That question becomes even more interesting when looking at the Dolphins' cornerback room. Although there are concerns about the overall talent level, Miami has added multiple younger defensive backs and continues building depth. Chris Johnson enters the picture, while players such as Jason Marshall Jr., Juju Brent, Ethan Bonner, Alex Austin, and Darrell Baker Jr. also contribute to what has become a fairly crowded position group. Because of that competition, adding another veteran raises an important question. Would bringing in Diggs actually help the team, or would it simply reduce opportunities for younger players who still need valuable snaps to continue developing? That appears to be one of the strongest arguments against making the move. If Miami is not viewed as a team that must prioritize immediate short-term results above everything else, allowing younger cornerbacks to gain experience may prove more valuable than allocating playing time to a veteran attempting to revive his career after difficult seasons affected by injuries. Even if Diggs were willing to sign for the league minimum, opinions remain divided. Some fans would still pass, believing the financial commitment is not the real issue. Instead, they question whether the roster spot itself could be better used elsewhere. And that's where the conversation becomes even more interesting, because there are other veteran defensive backs still available who some observers believe would provide stronger value than Diggs at this stage. Could that ultimately influence Miami's decision if the organization decides to add another experienced defender before training camp? The discussion becomes even more compelling when you look beyond Trayvon Diggs himself and start asking a much bigger question. If the Dolphins decide to bring in one more veteran before training camp, should cornerback even be the priority? That is where the debate really shifts. There's an expectation that Miami could still make another veteran addition before or during training camp. The roster still has areas that can be strengthened, but that does not automatically mean the front office will target another cornerback. In fact, there are strong arguments suggesting other positions deserve attention first. When evaluating the current roster, wide receiver, edge rusher, and safety appear to be bigger needs than cornerback. Even though the secondary has its own concerns, the Dolphins have already invested in adding bodies to that room. The organization has created competition, and now those players need opportunities to prove themselves on the field. That is why signing Diggs becomes a much more complicated decision than it initially appears. If Miami adds another cornerback, someone inevitably loses valuable practice reps and potentially regular season snaps. The question then becomes whether replacing those opportunities with a veteran coming off difficult seasons is really the smartest long-term move. Another interesting part of this discussion is that if the Dolphins were determined to add a veteran corner, there is another available player who stands out as a much stronger option based on recent performance. That player is Rasul Douglas. Unlike Diggs, Douglas is coming off a season that generated much more encouraging production and coverage. His numbers tell a very different story. Opposing quarterbacks completed only 55% of their passes when targeting him, while producing just a 72.6 passer rating. Those are the kinds of statistics that suggest consistent effectiveness rather than simply relying on reputation built years earlier. Because of that, if the Dolphins ultimately decide that a veteran cornerback is necessary, Douglas appears to fit that conversation much more naturally based on his recent level of play. That comparison also highlights the biggest challenge facing Diggs. This is no longer a conversation about what he accomplished several years ago. Everyone remembers the player who led the NFL in interceptions and earned Pro Bowl recognition. Those achievements will always remain part of his career. But NFL front offices have to evaluate players based on what they are capable of contributing today, not simply what they accomplished at their peak. Recent availability, health, consistency, and current production all carry tremendous weight. That explains why opinions remain so divided. Some fans still believe there is enough talent for Diggs to reinvent himself if he can finally stay healthy. Others believe the recent struggles are simply too significant to ignore and would rather see Miami continue developing younger defensive backs already competing for roster spots. Adding another layer to the discussion is the financial aspect. Even if Diggs accepted a league minimum contract, there are still questions about whether the investment would truly pay off. The cost itself may not be the biggest obstacle. Instead, the larger concern revolves around the opportunity cost of giving roster space and playing time to a veteran instead of allowing younger players to continue their development. Every training camp rep matters. Every preseason snap matters. Every opportunity to evaluate young talent becomes increasingly valuable for an organization trying to determine who deserves long-term roles. That is why this decision, if it ever reaches Miami's front office, extends far beyond simply asking whether Trayvon Diggs is a recognizable name. It becomes a question about roster construction, player development, and identifying which position would benefit the team the most if another veteran is eventually signed. For now, everything remains speculation, and there is no indication that a move is imminent. The discussion simply reflects one possible landing spot that has generated conversation because of previous organizational connections and the current free agent market.